How are the uses and gratifications of Facebook influenced by social expectation? This audio-visual presentation will examine the various ways in which social expectation, the necessity to conform, meet, and act accordingly to the standards or norms of a social group, can influence not only the way we use the social media network Facebook, but the eventual gratifications from use. Internet research has introduced new conceptual and operational approaches and new variables that now challenge some of the basic assumptions, procedures, and findings of uses and gratifications. Our three main areas of focus in this presentation will be intent and habit, satirical representation of self, and generational and demographic diversity of Facebook users. Statistics from August 2015 reveal Facebook to be the most popular social networking site in Australia, with a steady 1,400,000 users. Through the study of key theories and ideologies presented above, the presentation looks to examine fundamental concepts like self-regulation, demographic, habit, intent, representation, and presentation to determine the ways in which social expectation impacts a user's actions and reactions on Facebook. Using a convenient sample of Facebook users' answers provided by an anonymous survey, we will provide insights into the individual and sociological factors as well as Facebook motives to discover the influence on users and its close correlation with the conceptual elements of uses and gratifications theories. Uses and gratification theory has proven to be useful and popular theory to frame the study of computer-mediated communication, significantly social media and specifically for this presentation, Facebook use. Uses and gratification theory proposes that media uses and effects are best understood within the context of individuals' psychological and sociological characteristics, as well as his or her motives for using a medium, Katzenbloomer. Users approach media with goals in mind that they wish to fulfill, making this a functional perspective, Rubin 2002. Extensive Facebook research using uses and gratifications has largely explored the motives for Facebook use. Modern uses and gratification studies often focus on understanding the motives or reasons people use media, which in turn helps predict the gratifications they will gain from media use. Rubin 2002. A study that proved to be extraordinarily relevant in this particular field of social expectation was social cognitive theory, which offers a theoretical explanation for the often observed empirical relationship between media gratifications and media use. Rubin 2000. Within social cognitive theory, behavior is an observable act, and the performance of behavior, as originally conceptualized by Goffman, is determined by the expected outcomes of behavior, expectations formed by our own direct experience of mediated by vicarious reinforcement observed through others. Since expected gratifications outcomes may be formulated by vicarious observations of others' behavior, Easton 2002. They can explain consumption both among prospective future users of the Internet and current users. Many researchers have developed motive typologies for social network use. Often combined within interpersonal motives, social network research has shown several major motives for use. These include relationship maintenance, to pass time, virtual community, entertainment, coolness, and companionship. Sheldon, 2008. Existing research has shown that individual variables should be taken into consideration when examining the use of media. Argyle and Hills, 2003. Personality traits, self-esteem, or beliefs can often cause variations of answers among users, and what should also be taken into consideration is the largely varied demographic of users, which will be discussed with close reference later. These variables often play a role in the motives people have for using Facebook, a considerably influential motive being social expectation, causing people to reflect a part of themselves online that will be accepted by their known and unknown online audiences. An interesting aspect of this representation that occurs as a result of social expectation is self-regulation, the monitoring of our online selves, and as an extension of this concept, the notions of intent and habit. Intent or intention being the success of self-regulation. The causes of self-regulation often relate back to gratification such as coolness and uses such as narcissism. However, in the context of social cognitive theory comes the ideology of habit, which is a failure of self-monitoring and a subfunction of self-regulation. Through repetition, we become inattentive to the reasoning behind our media behavior. Our mind no longer devotes attention resources to evaluating it. It represents patterns or behaviors established by past thinking about outcome expectations or gratifications, that is, no longer repeated in the present. Habit strength is expected to influence ongoing behavior, independent or current active thinking about expected gratifications or outcomes. Now our focus will shift to specifically the representation of self on Facebook, or more so into how individuals may consciously choose to represent themselves satirically on social media.
Boyd in 2014 put significance when it comes to social media use in stating that intended audience matters regardless of the actual audience, and that the ability to understand how context, audience, and identity intersect is one of the central challenges people face in learning how to navigate social media. This goes parallel with my argument that social expectations may differ significantly between everyday life and what takes place on social media contextually. This may come as a direct result of the uses and gratifications present. Sheldon and Bryant, as of 2016, suggest that there's new gratifications, and when it comes to media, that coolness and creativity are examples of these. Social media is something that to an extent supports a level of narcissism, not necessarily a negative thing, but it shows that people are aware of how they portray themselves, they're conscious of it, and there can be a conscious effort to portray yourself satirically, which again is all about understanding the context of Facebook's. The reality is that portraying yourself satirically could come across as cool or unique or positively. Social expectation, which is true in both everyday life and on Facebook, favours the idea of portraying the best possible example of yourself. An online text from Culture, Power and Cyberspace suggests that people would customise their profile in order to provide the most efficient and positive advertisement of themselves. It's a self-constructed identity, again a type of use that is the result of certain gratifications that are present now when it comes to social media. Obar, Zub and Lamp talk significantly about this. I think a good example of this is the existence of the humanitarian presence on modern Facebook. People, whether they're informed or not, support a variety of political, environmental and societal issues in an attempt to portray themselves in such a way. We can use the example of Humans of New York, which is a Facebook page with over 17 million likes and essentially tries to give some context to New York City by focusing on the little people that wouldn't normally get a voice. But then we can take the satirical parody of it in Lizard People of New York, which essentially has the same premise but portrays people as, or through the popular conspiracy theory of lizard people. The satirical use of Facebook as a result of people wanting to seem funny, i.e. cool or intelligent and unique or creative, is a direct result of these new uses and gratifications and how social expectations influence them. Winter makes an argument which makes a lot of sense, is that a person's engagement with Facebook is reflective of their personality. The text suggests that people with low self-confidence are less inclined to present an authentic version of themselves. Because they're not as secure as others, they prefer to present a more satirical version of themselves, or as Winter puts it, to pursue the cautious strategy of presenting only superficial messages.
Now our focus will examine the change in behaviour between users in adolescence and in adulthood.
The purpose of this examination is to analyze the uses and gratifications of social media, in particular Facebook, and their effects on self-representation online. The focus of my research is the change in behavior between users in their adolescence and in their adulthood. From the earliest days of social media, platforms were presented as tools for making connections, promoting human connectedness, and community buildings. As Boyd and Allison observed in 2007, social media sites were about enhancing human relationships that already exist in real life. It is important to recall how most social network sites, notably Facebook, started out as friends sites in protected environments such as college campuses. Growing up in the digital age, current adolescents are substantial users of internet communication. Social network sites have potentially significant implications for adolescents' development. Concretely, 95% of teens aged 12 to 17 are internet users, and of this, 8 out of 10 frequently visit social media websites. Young adolescents access these sites through home and school computers as well as through most cell phones, allowing kids to be constantly plugged in. Based on this web spread, inside or outside the online domain, adolescent development is characteristically defined by a struggle with identity formation. In the theory of development, Erik Erikson's stage model of identity labels the adolescence year as a period of life when individuals experience a crisis in the identity state. The outcome of crisis includes either a formed identity with a clear and positive self-concept or identity confusion. With the aid of internet technologies, adolescents receive constant social feedback, which in turn affects how teens view themselves. Facebook allowed adolescents to directly witness others' thoughts and opinions about them and further prompt positive or negative self-benefits. It is possible to assume that high school students have different social needs than the working population, thus they have different perception of self-representation and self-disclosure, and their use of social media subsequently different. Promoting and branding the self has also become a normalized, accepted phenomenon in ordinary people's lives. Following the examples of celebrities' self-promotion, many users, especially young adults and teenagers, shape their online identity in order to gain popularity and hopefully reach a comfortable level of recognition and connectedness. Indeed, teenagers have always modeled their self-image after celebrities' exposures through mass media, such as television and movies, a phenomenon theorized by British socialist John Thompson in 1995, well before the advent of social media. But with these platforms, common users have gained an instrument for self-promotion that actually pays off. Those users who attain high levels of acknowledgement from their peers are recognized as influencers. They may receive offers from companies to distribute promoted messages or rewarded materially or symbolically.
Our questions for our survey were as follows. To what degree does social expectation influence your Facebook usage? Is your main use of Facebook social interaction? To what extent does desire for coolness influence your Facebook self? Can you please paraphrase what your last Facebook post was? And what was your intended response or reaction for this post? To what extent do you believe your usage of social media influences the experience of others using these platforms? Do you believe your actions on social media are intentional? Do you think that the way you represent yourself has changed over time, and how? Are you more cautious of what you post on Facebook due to social expectations? And how important do you consider likes when posting, sharing, or uploading things on Facebook? Our responses to this survey varied over the different fields of study discussed. The questions integrated for social expectation were also answered quite bizarrely. For the first question, to what degree does social expectation influence your Facebook usage? Over 50% of responded answers with not much A, implying that social expectation doesn't overly affect their uses of Facebook. However, when reworded and asked an extremely similar question, are you more cautious of what you post on Facebook due to social expectation? Almost 50% of respondents agreed that yes, social expectation influenced their actions. Interesting responses also came from the question, do you believe your actions on social media are intentional? Over 50% responded with yes, their actions are intentional. However, almost an equally as high 40% responded with sometimes they just like stuff, implying quite a bit of habit in their actions. The question integrated into our survey for demographical and generational difference, do you think the way you represent yourself has changed over time and how, provided the most consistent response to the survey, with over 60% of people believing that yes, they did feel their presentation of self had changed over time. However, surprisingly, the most consistency was found in the written responses, with almost every answer having associations with age, but more specifically, growing up.
I would suggest that 8 out of 34 responses when asked to paraphrase their most recent Facebook posts were satirical by nature. A significant proportion were in reference to memes, in particular Simpsons memes. Memes that their very basis are satirical in nature. And when it came to the intent behind the post, 3 specifically mentioned trying to be funny, with 6 more being satirical in themselves, one stating that the reason for their post was for all the bitties to see this and be like, wow, I do that. The reality is that satirical representation of yourself exists on social media. It may not be as significant as authentic portrayal, and it may be viewed out of context sometime and as a result misinterpreted. But the reality is that it is there, and these texts suggest this, and it is to an extent via uses and gratification influenced by social expectation.